In the interest of keeping everyone alive, I want to remind you that on July 4th, 1776, the weather was probably hotter than it is here today. Then again, it was Philadelphia and not Tidewater, Virginia, so the humidity might have been a little different, but not much. In addition to that, we do not have offal in the streets. Well, it depends on how you take that term. We have some awful things happening in our streets, but we do not have animal manure in our streets to attract flies. So if you see a fly today, it will be an unusual thing. In Philadelphia, it was not. Jenny Edenborn, where are you? There you are. Thank you so much for your music this morning. The flower arrangement that we have this morning is a donated flower arrangement. The donor wishes to remain anonymous, but this note, which would not be Nancy Wessing because she just outed herself, so she is not the donor. But the flower arrangement came from Smith Florists, so the next time you're in Smith's, thank them for their beautiful work. But the arrangement came with a note, and I think it is a poignant note, and I'm going to read it. It says, "May we think of freedom not to do as we please, but the opportunity to do what is right." I'm going to ask Billy Haley to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone stand, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing.
Oh, stand and you see by the dawn's early light, what so broadly we hail, that the twilight's last gleaming, lose more stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, they proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. As I bring you a word of welcome from Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church this morning, we've asked you to come masked, but I want to make a caveat here. We are outside. It is a beautiful day. The masks were originally instituted for 6 feet of distance when we were inside with one another. And since we are outside and it is a hot day, some people cannot have the mask on all the time. I'm one of them. I have COPD. There are people here with conditions which mitigate wearing a mask all the time. So what I'm asking you to do, since you're on the grounds of grace, I want you to be gracious to one another. Don't give somebody the stink eye if they're not wearing a mask. And don't give somebody the stink eye if they are wearing a mask. Let us proceed and enjoy our time together as we celebrate our nation's founding. Why are we here? I usually get choked up on the 4th verse of America the Beautiful. I'm not going to make it that far today. I got choked up when I started to say the pledge. I remember elementary school as a child every morning starting with a reading from the Bible. prayer and the pledge. Today we are here to celebrate the Declaration of Independence, but I want to jump a few decades ahead. The preamble to the Constitution begins with these words: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." Note that these words aspire to perfection. They do so in full recognition that perfection with the writing of the Constitution had not been reached. The framers knew that human beings are prone to error. They understood well that our system of checks and balances between three separate branches of government would mitigate against the tendency to tyranny and the accumulation and abuse of power by any individual or group. They well recognized there would always be work to be done. This grand experiment as a democratic republic would need dedication, hard work, sacrifice, sometimes with blood, so that a more perfect union might be achieved. It would be a journey, like Zeno's paradox, for those of you who are familiar with Greek philosophy, that could approach but never fully reach its destination of perfection. It would require each generation's work, participation, and dedication, or the experiment would fail. We gather at a time of conflict in our country, yet we are still one country. Some seek to divide us by race, or color, or gender, or creed, or ethnicity. Only one distinction needs to be recorded in the annals of time. We are Americans.
Yes.
Not hyphenated Americans. We are Americans. And we come together to remember our past, to celebrate in the present, and to secure a better future for our children and our children's children. We gather to honor past tradition, the extreme sacrifice in the cause of liberty, and unabashed love for the country that gave us birth and a home wherever we came from. No, we are not perfect. We never claim to be, but we aspire to perfection. And aspiration alone is insufficient. The lessons of history tell us that only that which is considered precious will be preserved. It is fair to say that of our liberties and our freedoms as well. It's not enough to celebrate our heritage. It's not enough to remember our history. It requires the dedication and hard work of each generation to preserve the good, while at the same time striving, hoping, aspiring, and laboring for the better and the best. In one of his speeches, President Ronald Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." Look around you. Look around you. There are a lot of gray heads here. A lot of heads with no hair on them. I'm one of them. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream, Reagan said. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free. I'd like to share with you the following that I read this week as we begin our time together. These are not my words, but they need to be heard. There was a time when our children stood at attention and with pride put their hand on their heart and in one united voice recited the Pledge of Allegiance. There was a time when strength and honor meant something. There was a time when standing for our flag meant something. There was a time when our history, our heritage was taught with pride and respect. There was a time when respect was given to those who served, bled, and died to protect and defend our freedom. There was a time when we were grateful. There was a time when our accomplishments meant something. There was a time when these United States of America, one nation under God, were united. There was a time when these United States of America, one nation under God, was united under the American flag, a flag that was carried into battle by brave patriots as a symbol of freedom and justice for all, no matter race, religion, or background, a beacon of hope and freedom. A mark of respect to their memory to those who willfully sacrificed their lives to defend it. There was a time when we, the people, decided our future. There was a time when we, the people, had a voice. There was a time when we, the people, were united and strong. There was a time when our elected leaders stood their ground, dug in, and defended those that they represented. How many men and women in uniform are currently serving on the front lines abroad only to look back in horror to see their homeland on fire? What does the word patriot mean to you? Land of the free, home of the brave. Now is not the time to be complacent. Will you answer the call? It's time to get to work. Let us pray together. Oh God, make us a great nation, yes, but more than that, make us good, Lord. With a heartbeat that wants every person of every creed and color to know your love, your goodness, and your worth. Make us wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. Turn our fears to faith as we look to you and you alone for the future of our country. Give us God confidence that no matter what happens, we believe you and you only are not only in control, but that you know exactly what is needed to accomplish your purpose. Help us not to second guess your moves, but to move at your command, always without hesitation. Forgive us for wanting our own way, making our own paths, often the ones paved with least resistance. Forgive us for fence walking or for ignoring completely the truths that we can so easily find to set us free. Deliver us from mindless quarrels and destinations that lead us nowhere but away from you. Free us from divisiveness and melt our hardened hearts to value life and love, to value love and not hate, and to heal and not debate. In Jesus' name, amen. Good morning. First scripture this morning is Psalm 33, and I'm going to read from the King James Version, which are the same words that our forefathers would have carried into battle, would have carried into Congress, and would have carried home. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, for praise is comely for the upright. Praise the Lord with harp, sing unto him with the psaltery and an instrument of 10 strings. Sing unto him a new song, play skillfully and with a loud noise. For the word of the Lord is right, and his works are done in truth. He loveth righteousness and judgment. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all of the host of them by the breath of his mouth. He gathereth the waters of the sea together as a heap. He layeth up in the depth in storehouses. Let the earth fear for the Lord. Let all inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. The Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. He maketh the devices of the people of none effect. The counsel of the Lord standeth forever, and the thoughts of his heart are to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. The Lord looketh from heaven, he beholdeth all the sons of men.
From the place of his habitation he looketh upon all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashioneth their hearts alike. He considereth all their works. There is no king saved by the multitude of a host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. An horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope is his mercy, to deliver their soul from death, and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waiteth upon the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us, according as we hope in thee.
You may remain seated if you like, or you may stand if you like.
Good morning, everyone. I have been asked to read excerpts from the Declaration of Independence. This is particularly poignant for me because I consider this the most magnificent document ever. And what is so interesting to me is that Thomas Jefferson spent so much time in our little county here. He spent time, 20 years before he wrote this, a lot of time with Colonel John Page at Rosewell. He spent so much time there that they named the Blue Room, renamed it the Jefferson Room. And there's no question that the people who visited the Pages and visited Jefferson in this place formulated the concept of liberty, the concept of America. So it's extremely important to me because I'm involved with Rosewell and it's right here in our backyard. We can be pretty proud of what's happened here. The excerpts we're going to read are basically everything in the Constitution with the exception of the grievances. This I consider a happy event. I think it's a magnificent thing, so we don't need to dwell on the negative sides. In Congress, this was presented July 4, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for the future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Then there's the long list of grievances. And it's finished by, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and our settlement here. And we have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. I knew I was going to have a problem with that. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assemble, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the vicissitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United States are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for this support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Oh, beautiful forsaken stars. shining sea. Oh, beautiful for pilgrim feet who serve in passion stress. A thoroughfare of freedom meet across the wilderness. America, America, again drive every foe. Confront the struggle with self-control, by liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for heroes stood in liberating strife, who bore himself their country love and mercy more than mine. America, America, may God thy glory found. Still all success be nobleness, and everything divine. Oh, beautiful for patriotry that sees beyond the years. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, I share this grace on thee, and crown thy name with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Paul Harvey was a famous radio personality back in the 40s, and he became interested in what happened to the signers of the Declaration. And this little book is the result of his research, and I shall be reading most of this. King George III had denounced all rebels in America as traitors. Punishment for treason was hanging. The names now so familiar to you from the several signatures on that Declaration of Independence, the names were kept secret for 6 months. The names for each knew the full meaning of that magnificent last paragraph, in which his signature pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. 56 men placed their names beneath that pledge. 56 men knew when they signed they were risking everything. Carter Braxton of Virginia, a wealthy planter and ship trader, saw his ships swept from the seas. To pay his debts, he lost his home and all his properties and died in rags. Thomas Lynch Jr., who signed that pledge, was a third-generation rice grower, aristocrat, large plantation owner. After he signed, his health failed. With his wife, he set out for France to regain his failing health. Their ship never got to France, was never heard from again. Thomas McKeon of Delaware was so harassed by the enemy that he was forced to move his family 5 times in 5 months. He served in Congress without pay, his family in poverty and in hiding. Vandals looted the properties of Ellery, Clymer, Hall, Gwinnett, Walton, Haywood, Rutledge, and Middleton. And Thomas Nelson Jr. of Virginia raised $2 million on his own signature to provision our allies, the French fleet. After the war, he personally paid back the loans. wiped out his entire estate. He was never reimbursed by his government. In the final battle for Yorktown, he, Nelson, urged General Washington to fire on his own home, which was occupied by Cornwallis. It was destroyed. He died bankrupt and was buried in an unmarked grave. Thomas Nelson Jr. had pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. The Hessians seized the home of Francis Hopkinson of New Jersey. Francis Lewis had his home and everything destroyed, his wife imprisoned. She died within a few months. Richard Stockton, who signed that declaration, was captured and mistreated, and his health broken to the extent that he died at 51. His estate was pillaged. Thomas Hayward Jr. was captured when Charleston fell. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside while she was dying. Their 13 children fled in all directions for their lives. His fields and gristmill were laid waste. For more than a year, he lived in forests and caves and returned home after the war to find his wife dead, his children gone, his properties gone. He died a few weeks later of exhaustion and a broken heart. Lewis Morris saw his land destroyed, his family scattered. Philip Livingston died within a few months from the hardships of the war. John Hancock, history remembers best, due to a quirk of fate rather than anything he stood for. That great sweeping signature attesting to his vanity towers over the others. One of the wealthiest men in New England, he stood outside Boston one terrible night of the war and said, "Burn Boston, though it makes John Hancock a beggar, if the public good requires it." He too lived up to the pledge. Of the 56, few were long to survive. 5 were captured by the British and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes from Rhode Island to Charleston sacked, looted, occupied by the enemy, or burned. 2 lost their sons in the army. 1 had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 died in the war from its hardships or from its more merciful bullets. I don't know what impression you had of the men who met that hot summer in Philadelphia, but I think it is important that we remember this about them. They were not poor men or wild-eyed pirates. They were men of means, rich men, most of them, who enjoyed much ease and luxury in their personal living. Not hungry men, prosperous men, wealthy landowners, substantially secure in their prosperity. But they considered liberty, and this is as much as I shall say of it, they had learned that liberty is much more important than security. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, and they fulfilled their pledge. They paid the price, and freedom was born.
Before Tara and I attempt the Stars and Stripes Forever, I would like to say that in the normal year, everybody's saying this is the new normal. No, it's not. This is not. In a normal year, the choir would do a tribute to the armed forces. because the choir has not sung together since before Christmas, we aren't going to do that. Enough said. However, we still want to do a tribute to those who served. So when you hear the song of your branch of the armed services, please stand and be recognized. We hope. Luann's got a finger. choir today. As I told the congregation last week, ad hoc is a Latin phrase that means thrown together at the last minute. And we are going to sing God Bless America. George is going to read the names of the signers of the Declaration, and Braden will ring the bell, and then Warren will shoot something. No. Warren will demonstrate the musket.
In honor of those intrepid individuals who pledged their lives, their sacred honor, and their fortunes, I now read the roll call of those signers. Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Walcott. From Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKeenan. From Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton. From Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Packer, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll. From Massachusetts, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Trent Payne, Eldridge Jerry. From New Hampshire, Joseph Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. From New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark. From New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. From North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. From Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross. From Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. From South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton, and from Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton.
Today we would like to honor all patriots, past and present, known and unknown, and their families. In the Revolutionary War, one soldier left the farm, wife was left by Vietnam. Themselves and myself. So this morning I want you to know that in the Revolutionary War these things misfired about half the time. So I've got to Just a reminder as you leave, if someone from Grace who knows how the chair should be placed in the carriage would be there. As you leave, if you carry your chair to the carriage and then someone will place it on the carriage to be taken back inside, we would appreciate it. Also, there's water in the cooler. Don't go home thirsty and hot. Just go home. No. Just go home and celebrate Independence Day. We're glad that you came. I hope that you enjoyed being here. Next year, hopefully, we'll be inside where it's air conditioned. But we'll do what we can. Please rise, and I'm going to give the benediction and send you on your way. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the wonderful experiment of freedom that we are a part of by heritage. Many of us by birth, some of us by choosing to come to this country to seek a greater freedom. We pray that you would help us to appreciate that which we have received from those who have gone before us, knowing that it has been preserved for us so that we might pass it on to our children and our children's children. Send us forth in the power of your Spirit to be the country that you have called us to be, united, strong, moral, and good. And we thank you for these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Good job, Braden.
Thank you.
You become our real official camera guy, haven't you? Hello,
Yeah.
Query.
I'm starting to become a man of many talents.
That's a good thing to be.
Not only music, but now in the technological way.
I'll wait till he's finished.